All right, Matt, pay attention, because today we're cooking some ribs. Now, this is a whole rack that I already got, and what I've done is I've cut them in half to make two half racks. Now, whenever you're dealing with ribs like this, the first thing you're going to want to do before we put them on the grill is you're going to want to remove this membrane, and this can be kind of a pain in the ass. So, here's what you're going to do. Usually you want to try it with a dull knife and go along one of the bones here. And you see this white membrane that goes along the back of the ribs? You're going to want to go along this bone and try to get this knife underneath this membrane. And you're going to want to keep it, or try to keep it, as intact as possible. And usually they're pretty tough, so this is kind of easy. But sometimes, well, sometimes it can give you trouble. So once you've got a foothold under one, once you've got like a little tab scraped up, yeah, there we go. Take you a bit of paper towel to help you grip it. Grab that little piece of membrane, and usually it'll peel off clean just like that. There we go. And that will expose this meat and these bones underneath. If you leave this on, it won't taste good. It'll taste like a layer of leather underneath your ribs. And you'd like to avoid that. So, alright, that one felt better. There we go. Alright. Just kind of pick and make sure that we've gotten the last bit of that tough inner membrane. That doesn't feel like there's any there. Yep, looks like we got it. That's just fatty tissue. Alright, so there we go. So, now these ribs have been out on the board for a few minutes. We are going to go ahead. We have our grill preheating to about 250, 350. You want it somewhere in that range, because this is we're gonna cook these low and slow on our grill. Get that tenderness, get that smoky flavor kind of imbued into the ribs. But before we do that, we don't want them to go onto the grill cold. So before we do that, we're going to season them. And there's a couple of ways of going about doing this. So let's get our seasoning. So here's what we're going to be using today: the Grill Mates All-Purpose Barbecue Seasoning. And this is going to give us kind of a good smoky flavor. You don't necessarily have to use one of these prepackaged deals, because most of them follow the same pattern. They've usually got some kind of sugar, salt, spices, especially, different kinds of peppers, some kind of garlic and onion. You can make these for yourself, just kind of adding the little bits of flair that you want your ribs to taste like. But I just sometimes use these kind of things because they're just easier than putting them together yourself. So, we're just going to give these ribs a generous coating. Forward one side and down and back the other. And just kind of little circular motions, just kind of massage that seasoning in there on this side. Now, a lot of these, some of this seasoning is going to kind of crisp up and fall off your ribs while cooking. But that's okay. That's why we have barbecue sauce. But we do not put our barbecue sauce on before the ribs go on to the grill. In fact, we wait until about the last 20 or 30 minutes of cooking before we brush on our barbecue sauce. But that'll come in a minute. We just want to make sure that we get a good layer of this spice, these seasonings, on our ribs. Get it top side, bottom side, rub it all in real good. That might be why they call these things seasoning rubs. I don't know. I wasn't around when they named them. So there we go. We got them seasoned. And here's what you're going to want to do. You're going to want to let these set outside, or not outside, but at room temperature. Let the temperature in them kind of come up to room temperature about 10 to 20 minutes. You don't want them cold when they go on the grill. Now, these came from the store pretty recently, and they were out in the, transporting from the car and everything, so I don't think they were freezing cold when I took them out of the fridge. So, I'm going to give these about 15 or 20 minutes on the board, and then we're going to go check on our grill and see how preheating is going with that. All right, Matty boy. So, our grill has been preheating for about 10 minutes now while I was talking to you in there. And it's almost up to about 300 degrees. Now you'll see, I only have half of the big grill on. By the way, I got a new grill. It's a Weber Spirit 2. I thought that was kind of nifty. Anyway, so this is something else we're going to be using today. This is called an Amazin smoking tube. It's a pretty cool little gadget if you don't have a smoker and you don't want to buy one. It's a pretty cool little gadget because what it does is you stuff it with wood pellets and you light the end on fire, and you're supposed to have it filled all the way up, but I didn't have enough pellets. You light one end on fire and you let it burn for a few minutes, and then you blow it out and let it smolder throughout your cook. And what it'll do is it'll imbue your ribs with that smoky flavor that you want. So we're going to let that burn for, about 5 to 8 minutes. And we're going to blow it out and then put it on our grill right before we put our ribs on. And what that's going to do is it's going to fill this hood with smoke and kind of get those ribs with that nice and smoky flavor. So we only got half of our burners on. We're going to be cooking indirect over low heat. So about 250 to 300 degrees for this cook. And with the smoke and everything, and over about 2.5 hours, that's what's going to give us that flavor that we're looking for. And while we're waiting on this to finish burning so that we can blow it out and go ahead and put it on and put our ribs on, we're going to make our barbecue sauce. All right, Matt, so here's what we've done. This is going to be our barbecue sauce, which we're going to make and put on the ribs in the last 10 to 20 minutes of cooking. Or last 20 to 30, excuse me. It's fairly easy to make, and I'll put the recipe down in the description. But you got to promise not to share it with anybody. So what you're going to do is you're going to take a yellow onion, and sorry, but filming myself doing this is just kind of a logistical nightmare. So I'm just going to describe it to you, but it's actually very simple if you write it all down and just follow the steps. You take a yellow onion, a large one, and you chop it up into these little 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch pieces. Doesn't really matter, just get them to a manageable size. Chop that up along with 4 cloves of garlic. So 4 little bits of garlic. Chop those up real nice into little bits. And toss them in a pot with 1/2 stick of unsalted butter. Now, the butter is going to melt, and those onions are going to start, and those onions and garlic are going to start cooking. You're going to want to cook them until they get this nice translucent color here. In other words, when they're kind of see-through. That's going to take about 10 minutes. Now, after the onions and garlic are done cooking, what you're going to want to do is take 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, a cup of regular old red ketchup. Let me make sure that I don't tell you wrong here. A cup of regular old red ketchup, 3 tablespoons of tomato paste, 2 8-ounce glass bottles of Dr. Pepper soda, a half cup of apple cider vinegar, a third of a cup of Worcestershire sauce, 2/3 of a cup of dark brown sugar, but I would add a little bit more just to make it a little bit sweeter for these ribs. Then you're going to put 2 teaspoons of Mexican chili powder, 1 teaspoon of white pepper, and no, that does not mean salt. That means white pepper. And then a teaspoon of just regular old sea salt. And you're going to put those in there together, and you're going to bring them to about a medium heat and let them simmer until they start to thicken. That's going to take you about 20 or 30 minutes. And when this starts thickening up, then you're going to take it off and you're going to throw it in a food processor or a blender, and that's what's going to chop all these onions up, and that's really going to help it thicken up a bit. What I generally like to do after that is let it cool in the fridge for a bit before it's time to go on the ribs or whatever it is that I'm putting it on. But this is my recipe for Dr. Pepper barbecue sauce. It is not my original recipe. I found it. Somebody else made the recipe upon which this one is based, and I did some tweaks to it. But it comes up with this very sweet flavor from the Dr. Pepper, and gets some notes of tomato, onions, and garlic in there with just enough spice. And you can mess with the ratios as you experiment on it on your journey to becoming a griller yourself. But this is how I do it. And so this is how you can start off doing it. So anyway, that's how you make that. Let's go check on our ribs, because they've been on for almost an hour now. Alright, Matt, so here they are. It's been about 2.5 hours. You can see our smoker tube is just about done there. We have maintained a temperature of about 300 degrees or so. And what we're going to do now is just cut on our thermometer. Give it a good stick, one of the soft points. And we're looking for at least 145 degrees, and both of these are well over that temperature. So, being that they are past 145 degrees, which is the safe internal temperature for ribs, we are going to go ahead and put those on these raised cooking racks to let them finish, because they just got about just about 5 or 10 more minutes. We just brushed on our sauce, so give those about 5 or 10 minutes for that sauce to caramelize. The sugar in the sauce, from that Dr. Pepper and everything that we made, is going to caramelize and really sweeten up and pick up some of this smoky flavor. And you might be able to see there's a good amount of smoke coming up off this grill, so we're doing a pretty good job. So we're going to give that about 10 or 15 more minutes, and then we're going to pull them and let them rest for a minute, and then they'll be ready to eat. Alright, so here we are, just about ready to check on them one last time before we pull them. And as you can see, the sauce has started to kind of caramelize on them a bit, which is exactly what we're looking for. Our smoker tube is still going strong. We're going to give them just another minute at about 300 degrees. So what we've done is we've kept it about 300 to 350. We've tried to keep it closer on the side of 300. And we've given them about 2 hours and around 30 minutes. 2 hours 30, 2 hours 40, maybe 3 hours, depending on how well you're maintaining heat. But these things have had plenty of time on the grill. They've picked up a lot of that sweet and smoky flavor from those hickory pellets, and they're just about ready to come off. And so we'll cut into them in just a minute and see how they look. All right, so we have taken our ribs off the grill, and we've let them rest for about 10 minutes. Now let's cut them up and see how we did. So let's see, there's the meat. Your blade should pass through it. Oh damn, that sauce is good. Your blade should pass through it without any problems. And that's what you're looking for right there. A little bit of pink, a little bit of white. It should come off the bone without too much trouble. And just give it a little taste. Yep. That's about what this should taste like. Well, I hope you learned something, Matt. But if you have any questions, feel free to send me a message. It's very simple. Remove the membrane. Preheat your grill to about 250 to 300 degrees. Indirect cooking on a low heat for about 2.5 to 3 hours. Brush the sauce on the last 15 to 20 minutes. You gotta make the sauce, obviously. Or you can use a store-bought one. I prefer to make it, but whatever. And then let it rest for about 10 minutes before you serve them up. Hope you learned something, Matt.